Steve, thank you very much. Firstly, I'll address the point touched by Umafriga Gustav on education. May I suggest that for the resolution, we also talk about education and awareness. Yes. And taking a point from the brother, I'm sorry, brother, I don't know your name. Johannes. Okay, Umafrigo Johannes, about preparedness. Revolutionary preparedness is critical in anything that we have to do. One of the things that we have to understand is that just because the leaders are ready doesn't mean the people are ready. Yeah. Otherwise, the tendency is that you get rejected by the same people that you believe you are liberating. Yes. So it's critical that the masses be prepared and ready. And I'll just read a couple of paragraphs. I'll not speak for black people because I don't subscribe to the notion of black. I'm an African and that's the bottom line. And I will not speak for the ANC either. What I would like us to listen to as I read will address, I hope, to Africa Glenn, the issue where he asked the question, where were they when we were fighting? This is a statement of the dissolution of the South African Colored People's Congress by Bani Desai and Cardiff Mani, London, March 1966. I'll just pick a couple of paragraphs. I'm not going to read the whole thing. It starts off by saying, for 13 proud years of its existence on the South African political scene. Volume, okay, sure. For 13 proud years of its existence on the South African political scene, the Colored People's Congress has struggled with uncompromising militancy and grim determination against white supremacy. Our Congress was established to develop the political consciousness of the 1.7 million of so-called mixed race, to combat racialism amongst them, and to link their struggle with the general movement for democracy of the oppressed as a whole. It has always been our belief that the destiny of the colored Africans is indissolubly bound up with the oppressed black Africans, and that there should finally be a unified organization cutting across race lines representing all enslaved masses of our country. I've skipped a paragraph. The next paragraph goes on to say, I'm just picking the ones that I think are relevant for what we are talking about today. Noteworthy as this experiment was, it failed. It multiplied racialism and entrenched it in the sectional organizations. It led to a monumental betrayal of the best interests of the enslaved masses. Our Congress now feels duty-bound to reveal to the people that when in 1962, the Colored People's Congress proposed to the ANC as the major mass organization of the Alliance that it should open its doors for all the oppressed groups, and that in return, the Colored People's Congress would dissolve, the proposal was flatly rejected. And the ANC leadership unashamedly announced that it could no longer meet with the other congresses for joint consultation, as was the practice in the past. Since that time, ANC leadership have used the fiction of a Congress alliance as a matter of political expediency. Nonetheless, the CPC has over the past 3 years patiently reasoned with the ANC leadership, pointing out that their sectional stand presented a grave danger to the best interests of our struggle and helped to strengthen racialism. Not only have we been rebuffed in our efforts, but we have had to witness the external leadership of the ANC conduct a campaign of slander and disruption against the CPC leadership. It goes on to say, in a recent statement, the ANC leadership made the remarkable assertion that they alone as Black Africans can take decisions on behalf of the African people. This is nothing less than invented Verwoodian reasoning, as if the Khoe, Hottentots, and Batwa Bushmen tribes, as the forebears of the Cape Colored people, were not Africans, who were virtually exterminated in the first battles against the European invaders of South Africa 3 years ago. I'm almost at the end. Months of careful and considered deliberations, together with the accumulated experience of our past associations, have convinced the Colored People's Congress that a decisive break must be made with the past. We will nevertheless warmly cherish our comradeship with the rank and file of the ANC, who we are sure will discover and deal with the treachery of their leadership. And then the most important part for me in our discussion, convinced that our actions represent a watershed in South African politics and that they must have the greatest influence on the future development of our common struggle, we therefore solemnly declare, number one declaration, declare that the South African Colored People's Congress is dissolved. Declaration number two, recognize the revolutionary character of the Pan-Africanist Congress and announce our acceptance of their comradely invitation to join the PAC as Africans and equals, dedicating ourselves to building up one nation and wage a single struggle against the common enemy of white supremacy and its foreign backers who have made our country their looting ground. Call on all South African Coloureds and Indians, numbering 2.5 million enslaved people, to follow our example by becoming members of the dynamic Pan-Africanist Congress and for all time bury their racial tags. So, my Africa, what I would like us to understand as this house is that as long as we continue to view ourselves as the smallanyana different groups, we are not doing any good to the commonality of what we are faced with. Yes. I hear my brother talk about the solidarity of the Khoisan in all of Southern Africa. And this is one of the reasons why I cautioned yesterday against the continued use of the notion that the Khoe and the San are a minority group. Yes. You are not a minority group because you are part of a collective which is African. If I begin to identify myself within the context of my ethnicity, I become a minority group because I'm no longer part of the collective that gives me the power and gives me the energy and gives me the ability to fight a battle and win. Yes. So, my Africa, let's be clear that at the end of the day, we have suffered and we will continue to suffer because of who we are. Not because of how they see us and want to categorize us. Their categorization is not informed by their love for us. When the Afrikaner comes today and suddenly says, to the Khoe and the San, we recognize we want to work with you, it's not because there is a certain degree of love. It is because they are now in a corner. It is because they now realize that what they have enjoyed for these centuries is coming to an end. My Africa, let me be clear. From where I stand and from where the PAC stands, there is no difference between you and I as an African. And yes, I even mentioned it, the fact that we do acknowledge that indigeneity to Africa belongs to all of us. And we also acknowledge the fact that there are people who occupied this space and that space and that space before anyone else did. And in acknowledging that reality, what we are therefore saying and therefore calling for is that we have a conversation as between ourselves, so that we know how we coexist as between ourselves before we introduce anyone else into the conversation. So basically, what I am calling for is that as we resolve, let's get rid of this colonial mentality that is now working against us.
Yes.
We are the ones who are now imposing the differences on ourselves based on how someone else decided to classify us and identify us.
Who is us? Who is
Africans,
us?
My brother.
The point is there was a recognition here and acknowledgement. The Khoe son was here first. Is the Khoe son the brown man, the black man, the white man? Yeah.
My brother, this is my whole point.
No, I'm just asking you the question.
No,
we need
this
to
I'm
understand
answering
who
you.
is us. And that is the problem.
I'm answering you. My brother, this is my whole point.